morning, good evening, everyone. Welcome to this latest edition of the Indica Books Open House with Otis. You know the drill by now if you have watched any of the 52 videos earlier. So over to you, Otis.
Gosh, we are really getting perfunctory here. I don't know if this is a lowering of standards, a lowering of a kind of professional, ethical. I don't know. This is. I like
Okay,
it. I
you
like it.
you you've made me feel bad now. Okay, so here
No, no,
goes.
no, 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 no. I'm kidding. I am like the least. Diminishing the professional protocols is my style. So
Okay, but
I
let's
I I
okay.
like it.
We'll go just one level above absolute perfunctory. So, Indica Books Open House with Otis is an open platform that is available and open to anyone who subscribes to the Indica ethos, so to say, and who wants to improve their craft and art of writing, and also have a forum where they can interact with, meet, and see other writers' works. So we invite you to submit pieces about 800 words in length and send them to the email address that is provided on the Indica website post that talks more about this open house. You send the piece in, Otis will review, he will mark up, send the feedback back to you. And then when we meet on Sunday, and Otis spends time, and we also participate in that discussion, and or we can, if we want to, over those pieces. So over to you, Otis.
Thank you. Let me check to see if anyone here can jump on and help me. If you're Mac savvy, I shut down my computer and now my main computer screen is not available to me with my mouse. Like I can't really the person who should be up first because she's been handing me a piece, um, and
Uh, I don't
then
see
we
Vandana here among the attendees. There's Rashma,
I
Aditi,
really have
Madhvi, Ram, and Sricharan, but I don't see Vandana yet.
I really have to get my Indian pronunciation right because it's like a different syllabic, emphasis is the main thing. It seems to me, right? I mean, the I accent and I stress I stress syllables at the end, and in the Indian pronunciation, you really stress the beginning, and then the end is almost a collection of non-stressed syllables. It goes like to my ear. What happens is it like goes very quickly. It's like a quick like a waterfall. That's my
It
way of
is. It is.
describing it. I'm
It's
not a
also got to do, I
linguist.
think, with the number of syllables that are typically there in a lot of Indian names. Uh, and what doesn't help either is that there is a uh, when you write an Indian name in the Roman alphabet, the stress and the where what syllable and what word you're supposed to stress on and emphasize, that information just completely gets lost in translating from the Indian to the Roman alphabet.
Right, that makes sense. That makes sense to me.
And we have Vandana
Um,
who has just joined, so she should be appearing in the panelist section any second now, hopefully.
oh, look at that. I can still share my screen, but I just can't do anything with it once I'm there. This is bizarre. Uh, because I would really like to be able to access my screen. My screen. No, I don't want that. Sorry. Oh, I also maybe it's also partially that I upgraded my system. This is a little frustrating. Um, okay, Vandana, maybe let's start with you because we've been trying to look at your piece for a while now, and you've been submitting it, and let's get into it. And I guess we're just gonna have to do it by hook or by crook. Vandana, are you there?
Yes,
Vandana.
I'm there.
So you say Vandana, are you there? Yeah, Vandana.
Yeah, I think she's
You
there. Honestly, she's having some issues with her audio.
Yes, I can hear.
you can.
Wonderful.
Okay, so are you able to do video or not?
Yeah. Hi.
Hi, Vandana.
Hello.
Um, So yeah, so let's talk about your piece. I really want to draw it up onto the screen, but I am forbidden by my computer, who I have always realized is really truly the boss. And so maybe can I have you? Do you have your piece in front of you?
Yes, I have it.
Okay, and let me just quickly. Can I put you on hold um, for just a moment, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the house and get my iPad so I can look at your piece too, okay? So just give me 1 minute. Lana, can you, just to give everyone a flavor of this a little bit, could you read the first page of your piece? Vandana, are you still there or frozen?
Her video seems to be frozen, so I'm not sure if she's having bandwidth, low bandwidth or what.
Okay, so when she comes back, maybe we'll encourage her to drop the video, and that usually helps a little bit with the
Right.
bandwidth issue. Why are you not charging? Why are you not charging? Did I mention already that my children really set me up for failure this morning by draining my iPad and um, and not only draining my iPad but also draining my iPad pencil. They really contributed to my downfall today. Shall we say, my inevitable downfall. Okay, I feel like we've lost Vandana. Okay, let's get an old hand in here because we have some technical difficulties. Ram, let's get you in here. You know how this stuff works so well, and then we can get rolling. So Ram, let's take a look at your piece. And sorry about the confusion and the technical difficulties on my side today. Very frustrating. Okay. Oh, come on. Charge. See, what I really need is for my iPad to charge because it won't last. Okay, Ram, can you tell us a little bit about your piece and read some of it for us?
Yeah. This is the beginning of a horror novella I wrote. This is about 11,000 words. This is the first part of that. This is something that I was writing, a genre that I was attempting for the first time. I have hardly read any horror, and I had not written horror before, but somehow I just got inspired to write this. And this is something that I wrote almost, I think, a year ago. And the interesting that happened before I started writing this is Abhinav had recommended a book which was called Self Editing for Fiction Writers, and that was an outstanding book. And I had just started reading that. So some of the things that were in that, it made sense, and I tried to apply some of the learnings in this. And this is the background of that. I
So,
can share my screen if it helps.
So Ram, thank you for reminding everyone of that book, Self-Editing for Fiction Writers. I'm going to put a link to that book on the Zoom chat, and I will definitely say, as far as the whole craft of editing and point of view and those sorts of things are in that I found in that book. Definitely, I think it should be on everyone's list of reading, along with such classics as Strunk and White and a couple of other books that come to mind. So I'll share that link in just a couple of seconds.
Okay, Ram, yeah, it would be helpful if you shared your screen. Thank you. Okay. Yeah. So can you read a little bit of it? Maybe the first page.
Okay, something bizarre is happening when I share my screen. My mic is going on mute. I don't know why that.
Like why? What did we ever do? What did we ever do to Steve Jobs and Bill Gates? That's my question. I mean, why are they out to get us?
Let me try sharing my
Bill
entire
Gates.
screen. Okay, share. Yep, okay, this works. Okay, is my screen visible?
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Awesome. And you can hear me, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Okay, so Otis, should I read like the first page?
Yeah. Well, no. Let's read the interaction. Maybe the last page. The interaction with the girl, and then ending with school. And you can why don't you get us up to speed by just telling us what sort of happens in the beginning?
Sure. So the interaction with the girl starts here. The background is that it's a single mother. Her husband apparently has passed away in the recent past, which we get to know in a not so direct manner. And she is preparing her son for school. He seems to be a little belligerent. He's a little kid, and he's sulking for some reason. And the mother is driving the son to school. It's in the morning, it's traffic, and he missed his school bus, so she is already a little irritated because she has to drop and she's going to be late for work. That's the setting. They have stopped at a red light, a traffic light, and then this happens. I'll start reading. Didi, Didi, I have not eaten in 3 days. Give me something. The voice started Shravani. Shravani is the mother. A scrawny girl, not much older than Adi. Adi is the son, leaned on her side of the door begging. The girl's face was caked black with dirt. Her dress was threadbare, stained with dirt, time, and poverty. Go away, I have nothing to give you, Shravani said, dismissing the girl with a wave of her hand. Please, Didi, please, I have not eaten, Didi. God will bless you and your son. Please give me something, Didi, 5 rupees at least. The girl thrust a curled palm through the open window and nudged Shravani's arm. Shravani looked down at her arm. A faint brown stain marked the white sleeve of her kurta. The best? Shoo, shoo, go away, go away. Shravani pulled the window up a notch and jogged the knob, threatening to pull it all the way up. The girl became more insistent. Please, Didi. Shravani looked at the traffic light. It would turn green any time now. Are, I said go away, no? At least give me that biscuit packet and banana. The girl thrust her arm into the car, trying to reach across Shravani and grab the eatables. The stench of stale sweat filled the car. The vehicles around started revving in anticipation of the light turning green. Shravani grabbed his scrawny arm and pushed it out the window. The girl staggered, tripped, and fell backward. Shravani glared at the girl. The girl picked up a handful of dirt and raised her arm to throw it at Shravani, uttering a curse. What are you glaring at like that? I will pull out your eyes, the girl screamed. Shravani shook a finger in warning. The traffic light turned green and Shravani eased the car forward. Shravani glanced into the side mirror. The girl was running after the car. Shravani pulled Adi back and rolled up both their windows. Traffic was still crawling and the girl caught up. She banged on the window. How dare you push me? Your son. Shravani revved the engine a bit. The girl running alongside the car shook a finger. North Point School. That's where he studies, no? I also know where you live. I know everything. See what I do to you now. Shravani saw a gap in the traffic and sped into it. The girl jumped back just in time. Yep, that's
Jump back
the
just in time, and let's see.
Yeah, and then she continues. Should I continue reading?
Yeah, why not? I'm enjoying it.
Okay. Shravani glanced at Adi. He sat pasted to the door, away from her, staring out the window, face pressed against the window pane. She reached out with her free hand and stroked his head. Adi pushed it away. At the school gate, Adi jumped out of the car and ran. Shravani waved a goodbye to Adi's back. The biscuit packet and banana lay on the floor of the car. Shravani sighed. A slice of Oreo cake in the evening will make him happy. She flicked her wrist to see the time. Late again.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so this is a test day, Ram. I think you've graduated to the point where we're going to, put it on you to explain my cryptic comment. So my comment on this piece was it's a middle without a beginning or an ending.
Yeah.
So I thought maybe you could speak to this a little bit, to just get you to articulate, and then, we'll bounce back, back and forth a couple ideas. So what do I mean by that?
Okay. My first reaction to that was that maybe you were looking at this piece in isolation. This is the beginning of a longer story. This is about 10,000 words.
I see.
But I know what came next because I have been in enough sessions, so I know what Otis will say.
Let me interject here. So your first thought was that it was my problem. I like that. Okay, so the first thought, I think this is classic with human beings. The first thought is that it's their problem. Okay, good. I'm glad.
So then I realized that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether you have the background or you have the context or not, and whether it is the beginning of the story or the end. Any piece has to make sense on its own. When I go to a bookstore and pick up a novel, I don't read from the first line and I read 20 pages. I just open a random page and I read maybe a paragraph, and that paragraph has to make sense. If that doesn't make sense to me, then I don't pick up that book. And it has to work in the same manner for any story that I write. It doesn't matter whether somebody is reading the beginning, middle, or end, or some random passage. That has to make sense, and that has to draw the person in. So then what I gathered from your comments was that this piece that I submitted, it does not give the reader a context of what is happening. So it starts with, we jump straight into the action. The basic opening is that there is a small scene between the mother and the son, and it is left to the reader to figure out what is the backstory.
Okay.
So I'm not sure whether that is a good thing or a bad thing. Maybe it's a good thing because I'm letting the reader be intelligent and figure it out, not spoon feeding. But it could also mean that if the reader has to do too much work to figure out where in time and space this is happening, it might make them feel that, okay, it's like involving too much work, so let me just see if there is anything more interesting to do.
Okay, let me have you just review these things. So in writing, I think this is probably the most fundamental thing of writing. So this division between the beginning, middle, and end. And this is something that I heard when I was in graduate school, probably from Bill Harrison, who said, I'd rather cut off my hands at the wrist than write this paragraph. So he probably said that a story has to have a beginning, middle, and end. And I'm going to tell you, Ram, that made no sense to me whatsoever. I thought to myself, damn you, Bill Harrison, what the hell do you mean by that? I'm hoping that over the course of how many sessions, 52, that I've tried to talk about what this means, this very fundamental principle. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about what it means, and it's not complicated. So that's the main thing. That's a hint.
Yeah. No, I mean, what bad defense and bad excuse.
Let me put it this way. I'm gonna give you a starter. Okay. So beginning, middle, and the end. What it means is that the beginning does what the beginning does. The beginning is a beginning. Okay. Right. The middle does what the middle does, which means it is a middle.
Right.
And the end does what the end does, which means it is an end.
Right.
So tell me about what a beginning does. What is it to be a beginning in a story?
So a beginning means that there is nothing before that, and there is something that comes after that.
Okay, so what does there have to be in the beginning? What do we have to have on the page in the beginning?
We need to have an introduction to the characters, that it is A and B, who's the antagonist and who's the protagonist. We need to be able to identify the antagonist, the protagonist, and probably a hint at the conflict.
Okay, so when we identify the protagonist and the antagonist, we are already indicating the conflict. But it's not that we have two conflicts that we have to develop in the beginning. Do you recall what they are?
No, we just need to have. If we have two conflicts, then it makes it complicated. We need to have one conflict.
Okay, let's put it out. Let's see if we'll gather some other people in. Does anyone else want to take a stab at this question? Everyone's like, I did not know this could happen. They're like, oh my goodness. They're like, everyone's like,
Spot quiz.
So what are the two conflicts that we have to introduce at the beginning of any piece?
Oh, okay, that's.
And actually, Ram, what you're saying about the story in the book is true, but it's particularly true of a scene. So a scene has to have a shape, basically. A scene has to have a shape that has a beginning, middle, and end. And also the story does, the chapter does, the book does. It's basically a kind of accordion, situation.
Right.
So it's always the same kind of thing. So I'll throw out again. What anyone have any idea about what the two conflicts are? Go ahead, Ram.
Internal and external conflicts.
Right. So why do we have to have an internal and external conflict established in the beginning?
So the external conflict is the external manifestation of the internal conflict. Like for example, I don't know. So if I take James Bond for example, probably a bad example, but the external conflict is he's beating up the bad guys and all of that. But the internal conflict is he wants to prove himself. He comes from a not very privileged background. He's fought his way up, and he has this need to prove himself in every situation. That's his internal conflict.
Right. And anyone else want to chime in? What's the purpose of the external conflict and the purpose of the internal conflict? And let me ask you this. Okay, I'm going to say, what's the purpose for the reader? Why do we put these things on the page for the reader? And this is crucial because the beginning is meant to grab the reader by the throat and not let go. So what is it that the internal and external, and it doesn't matter which way we put these two on the page. External conflict on the page to start with is usually called in media res, which means starting in the middle of the action, because that's putting the antagonist and protagonist in action together. Then the internal conflict is obviously it's internal, so we're allowed some kind of insight somehow. We don't need to be allowed insight by going internally into the character. We can be allowed insight by having something dramatized, right? So we can have, James Bond is at home, he's drinking his whiskey, and then, suddenly the bad guys break in the door, and the first thing he does is he turns to the picture of his mother and their little house that's out in Stratfordshire or someplace, and he turns it upside down and puts a book on top of it, and then he fights the bad guys. So we've just gotten a little insight into his internal struggle, a desire to preserve this reflection of his poor upbringing or whatever it is, his fantasy of himself. Who knows? So it doesn't really matter what order we do it in or how we do it, but it must be done. Anyone want to take a stab at what it does for the reader?
So, Otis, to your question about why do we need so for the story and for the character, right? One moves the story forward, the other one gives an arc to the character, his or her development, and their motivations for doing what they do during the course of the story, which obviously in some ways parallels the arc of the story itself.
Right. So that's true. So the internal conflict is absolutely the motivation of the actions that are usually, they're not actions that will actually serve to solve the problem of the internal conflict. In fact, they don't, right? So, like James Bond needs to prove himself, but what he ends up doing through his violence is becoming monstrous and inhuman, right? He wants to be an equal to those he sees as above him, but he actually becomes a monster who's forever forbidden from joining their society, right? So it doesn't actually solve the external conflict that they're involved in doesn't really solve that problem. But let me go back to this idea of like, what does it do for the reader? So yes, there is something that it's doing in terms of the character and the story, but the story is in total a bridge that exists between the writer and the reader. And it's a compromise, between the two. Yeah, Ram, you had an idea?
So the internal conflict reflects one of few universal human conditions that the reader can relate to. And the external conflict, which is a manifestation of the internal conflict in the external world, lets the reader live that life through the pages in a safe place.
Right. Okay, so the internal conflict, importantly, is why do we care? Yeah. That for me captures the fundamental element of the internal conflict. Why does the reader care? And for the reader to care about the internal conflict, it has to deal with yes, it's universal. So we should be trying to access any reader. It's not your personal internal conflict. The scientist was wondering how to synthesize proteins. He's struggling to synthesize proteins. It's like, okay, that's just for scientists. We want it to be universal, but we also have to have it be of a level that is necessary to answer. Right? Does that make sense? It's like it has to be something that's actually intriguing to the reader. It can't be a problem that's so mundane. So for example, in your story, the mother trying to get the son to school is not an internal conflict. You're not letting us into an internal conflict that's enough for us to care about. It appears to be an everyday conflict. Now, that's not to say that getting the child to school might not be tremendously important to the mother in the same way that battling the evildoers is important to James Bond. It actually may be. But you need to let us know that so that we can actually care about the outcome of whether she gets her child to school or not. But if we don't care about the outcome and we don't even know why she's doing it, then we're actually reading this and Ram, I do want to say ahead of time that this is very well done. I'm absolutely in the scene. You have you're really handling the point of view very well. You're handling the sensory detail very well. You're handling the conflict very well. I mean, because and by conflict there, I mean things are happening. But I don't know why I care. I don't know what it means to her to accomplish these things. And therefore, it's actually just mundane.
Okay.
So as I read it, I'm just like, I mean, honestly, I mean, because I'm familiar with these kinds of things, I could just say to myself, why do I care? This gets me into the crucial issue very crucial issue, and I want everyone to take this in, this is, for the writer, this is our antagonist, okay? This is our antagonist, that our reader has their own life. Our reader has their own life. And so as I'm reading this, Ram, I'm like, okay, this is time in my life that I will never get back again. Right? It doesn't matter whether honestly, it doesn't matter whether it's 5 seconds or 5 hours.
Yeah.
It's still time that I will never get back. And what am I getting out of it? This is crucial for me. I mean, this This is the problem of writing. The problem of writing for us is not that we can obviously write, but will we be read? And in order to be read, we must do something for the reader. We have to do, in fact, we have to do an equal, maybe even more. We have to do more for the reader than we get ourselves, because we're asking for their lives. We're making an exchange of life. So we have to take that responsibility very seriously. It does not mean that we have to be intellectually profound, because intellectualism is, what is that, like sand in the sea or something like that? I mean, it's just, who cares? But the things about life that we really do care about, the things like proving yourself, being useful, being part of something, the things that actually are evolutionarily wired into us, that have ensured our survival.
Otis,
Yeah.
Aditi has a question, I believe.
Yeah. Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I was gonna ask Otis on this point about the mundane. So what if it's everyday actions, but the stakes for the character are high because getting the child to school may be the only way. If she's not able to do that, they don't have a relationship or something like that. So what if it's small actions, but the internal stakes are high?
Right. I mean, that is what I was saying. The action, the external conflict of getting the child to school can be a worthy external conflict, but we have to know somehow why it matters desperately to this person in a universal sense. So yeah, exactly that. We have to elevate that conflict. Otherwise, if I don't know, then I'm perceiving it just like I perceive my own life, basically that this is a pain in the ass. I have to get my kid to school on time. That's not, the thing is, in my own life, even, that's not actually true. My frantic, or Zandi's, our frantic need to get our children to school does have to do with how we represent ourselves to the society at large. But I, as a regular person, don't think about that. This is just the life I live. This is part of the reason that we're writing the story, to take these moments, even seemingly mundane moments. I mean, this is the work of Chekhov all over the place, right? This is what Chekhov did. He took everyday people and their mundane moments, and he elevated them up to the struggle of kings and queens and knights and all of the rest. I want to emphasize, he took regular people and their struggles to put a potato on the table, to get their children to school, to the way that they had to deal with their deaths and their struggles, and elevated them up to the same level of the people we were telling stories about before Chekhov, the heroes, the Achilles, the Agamemnons, the King Arthurs, etc. So yes, Aditi, that's a long way of me saying that you're correct. Ram, where'd you go? You trying to bail? Okay, so this is the shortcut to this. In every scene, you need to know what the character wants and why they want it. And you have to communicate both of those things so that the reader understands what they want and why they want it. The translation for the reader is what's going to happen. Will the protagonist succeed or not succeed? But it's actually tremendously important to add this other part. And why do I care? I do care. Right? So, what can happen in a story is that, and maybe it's a little bit like what's happening here at the beginning of your story, Ram, is that it's like watching I'll use the cricket match, watching a cricket match, but not caring about either team. So we see that there's a struggle going on,
Yeah.
but we don't care,
Right.
right? And if you know, usually, if I'm watching a cricket match, I'm also, drinking a cold beer, so at least I'm accomplishing something because I'm relaxing, and I don't want it, I'm basically resting. Um, but that's not exactly what we want to do with our story. We don't want to have our reader watch a cricket match and not care about either side. They have to care. And to care, they have to see what's at stake. And for it to be a stake of importance, it has to be this universal, concern itself with some of these universal concerns that are simple. They are simple, but they are also profoundly important to all of us. Can we find love and acceptance? Will we be forgiven? Can we be redeemed? Right? I mean, these are, God, they're so important to us. Okay, so that's the beginning, Ram.
Right.
You've written the middle, so tell us about the ending.
So the ending is what, okay, so the middle basically progresses the action. And I think in this, that progression of action is there. The ending is what resolves the conflict. Resolve as in it brings, resolve as in I don't mean that the protagonist wins, the antagonist wins, or any of that, but it sort of brings closure to the conflict.
Okay, so remember that I am suggesting that this form of beginning, middle, and end is, so that little form has to do with our poems, our tiny, 6-line, our 6-word story. There it is. Our sonnets, our paragraphs. Our paragraphs have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Isn't that amazing? Our scenes have a beginning, middle, and end. Our chapters have a beginning, middle, and end. Our books have a beginning, middle, and end. So it's not, we don't want to have continuous closure necessarily, but we do, like, as you say, we somehow resolve the problem. We somehow resolve the problem that was introduced in the beginning. So that's it. It's a little kernel that we introduce a problem in the beginning and we resolve it at the end. But we're resolving the problem that was introduced in the beginning. We're not solving the problem.
Yeah.
The true problem is the split, in a sense, between an external conflict and an internal conflict that's not realized. That we don't realize what's motivating us, in a sense. And we don't know what we're really trying to accomplish. And we're also trying to accomplish it through these external means, when in fact it's not an external issue, as we know, it's an internal issue.
Yeah.
Of we're looking to be accepted, right? But we're really and we're trained to seek acceptance in this outside world of competition, but really it's an internal acceptance that we need to be finding.
Yeah.
So yes, we want to resolve, and in this way, and we sometimes talk about this as having a change, right? So the character, and this, in a longer story, we move the character along the pathway by having them begin someplace, and I'll just call that A. I don't care where it is, so long as they get to B. The significant difference between the beginning A and B is that one is an A and one is a B.
Right.
It's a change, right? The next scene starts off with B and goes to C. The significant thing being that we started at B and we got to C. This is how we take steps through our story. But it's always basically dealing with the same internal struggle, because that's never going to have closure until the ending And then if you were here last week when I was talking to Ashwani, then we still want to make a choice about what we're really doing with the ending. How do we accomplish closure? And I'm suggesting that we don't actually shut the door on it, because I think that that's false. There is no closure to the struggles of life. But there is, I feel, the creation of the story, which creates a natural sense of ascension and transcendence for the reader, to give them this momentary catharsis so that they can have that to strengthen themselves, because in their own struggle of life. That's what we're doing as storytellers.
Yeah.
Is we're giving the reader that thing. So this is a long, big speech, of course, but we're talking about the most fundamental things. And this is, in a sense, what's missing in your small piece,
Yeah.
The small piece of a novella.
Yeah.
And in a way, once we get into this idea of why does it matter, right?
Right.
We're starting to get to the heart of things. Now we're asking the questions. We're not just writing the mundane, we're actually investigating the mundane. And then when we're investigating the mundane, we're also investigating human beings as they are, and we're investigating the human condition.
Okay.
So the question is, why does it matter that she gets the girl to, why does it matter to the mother to get the son to school on time? That's one thing. But then the next question will be, why does it matter that she has this altercation with this girl on the street? That's the long range. So the short range, right? The short story, the short con, if we want to call it that, the short con is will she get the kid to school on time or not? The long game is, why does it matter that she's going to have this altercation with this girl? And philosophically, I think of it this way. So we think of the protagonist and the antagonist. The antagonist is not just the enemy. They're also the teacher. The question being, why does this character need to have this story?
Okay.
And because we're attached to the character on a human level, it means that we, the reader, also, like our mother, has to have this story. Because there's something that we're going to get from it. Ram, you look bludgeoned.
No. Actually,
That
no. I actually, I know what the conflict is. It is not coming on page. So I'm like now bursting with ideas on how in each scene that can be fleshed out.
yeah. Okay. All right.
So
Thank you, Ram.
Thank you.
Good. This is what we always want at the end of any of these things, is to basically be on fire.
Yes.
We want to be on fire, and then
Yeah.
that's also partially why because I've been hammering this spring, is that we always are getting down. We're sitting down at our typewriter every single day for at least 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Then when we sit down at our typewriter and we're on fire, amazing things happen.
True.
But we have to have the habit of sitting down, or else we can be on fire, and then that fire goes out. So I know that's not to you, Ram. I know you're writing every day, but to all of us,
No,
write
it's not
every
true.
day.
Last couple of weeks I have not been regular.
Yeah, I mean, if you can imagine, it's like it's like writing every day is like, that's one stick, and then the fire is the other stick, and then we get it right.
Yeah, true. No, but this has been fantastic. Yeah.
Okay.
So thank you very much.
Vandana, let's try talking to you again. Sorry about the getting cut off earlier. Maybe if you have some bandwidth issues, we can just. Hi, Vandana.
Hello.
If we have bandwidth issues, we could just talk, if that's better for you.
What issues?
bandwidth, you know, like the internet?
No, no,
If we
mine is
use
okay.
video, then it uses up. Okay, good. Great. So let's talk about your piece a little bit. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about it, and then if you could read the first page so that we could hear a little bit of it, and then I'll talk about it a little bit.
This is about a girl. This is about a woman that like she wanted and her husband, or yeah, you can say it more of her husband. Like she wants to be with him together. They want to go out together. They want to spend time together. But then there's a hitch in her. She doesn't know. She doesn't realizes what the hitch is all about. She thinks I have written in two. The ending is in two paras. Two options are there. First option I have already submitted, and second option even I had submitted the last week.
Okay.
So she has a hitch. She doesn't knows what the hitch is about. She doesn't realize exactly what is the hitch about. She realizes it is it in the second part, that it is because that her man, he never used to listen to her. He never used to accompany what she wanted to go, where she wanted to go. So that is why now she doesn't want to accompany this her husband or the lover or anything, as you say.
Right. Okay. Great. Can you read? Let's see. Let me look at here. Maybe as I look at it, 1, 2, 3, 4. Could you read the first 4 paragraphs so that we can hear and get a little sense of the piece?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
I want to go with you, accompany you, feel the morning air on my skin, the fresh start of life, experience all the first with you. You have always been with me before, but you have always been with me before, but I want to go with you today. You have always asked me to come, but I had refused. There were times when you had begged me to come, but I had adamantly refused. Yet I want to experience the morning sun with you today. Come along. You come along. You can do this later. You had requested me, but I had refused. Even then, you would wait for me. There was seldom any day you would not ask me to come along. There were times you knew my answer, but even then you would ask me. You were sincere in your approach, but I always refused. Yet I want to experience the morning sun with you today. I want to come along with you always. I cherish the small moments we share. I know in this race of life, these are prized moments. Previously, I had always gone with you. I always want to be with you whenever possible. There were times when I was at loss to spend time with you. I adore these small moments of togetherness. Even you are aware of the mutual feelings we share. Yet I want to experience the morning sun with you today. You know, I always go with you. It is always more of being with you. I always want to come along with you, to be with you, to spend more time with you. Like in the earlier times, I do not know what your intentions were, but mine was to spend time with you. Yet I want to experience the morning sun with you today.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're getting a little bit of feedback, so Vandana, maybe you could mute for a second, and I'll talk about this piece a little bit. Okay, so we looked at this before and we talked about it, and I was talking a little bit how it seemed like almost a kind of prose poetry to me, because it had the repetitions. It has these sections that look like stanzas, and we have repetition of a certain kind. And I don't know if I can. Let me see if I can share this. I don't know if this will work. Okay, I'm trying to. Wow, very bizarre things happening. Okay, do you see that share? Is that on
Yeah,
there?
we can see.
Vandana? Oh, okay. Thank you, Ram. Okay, So these are my markings on here. Um, I I'm sort of pointing out that within these stanzas, what I'm perceiving as stanzas, because yeah, let's keep going with that. So I'm seeing this repetition, and of course, as you read these first paragraphs, we hear how much you comes into it, um, and we see the repetitions at the ending. But in a way, I'm not being directed kind of clearly enough for me to understand exactly what kind of work I'm getting. So I don't know whether this is a story or whether it's meant to be a poem. See, this is one of the issues with prose poetry is you kind of have to really help the reader understand, is it prose? And if it's prose, it's a story. And if it's poetry, you know, it has to kind of demonstrate that it's poetry. One of the ways that it would demonstrate that it's poetry is that it would be more formalized. We would see in these stanzas that they would be equal length, perhaps. Like the sonnet has iambic pentameter, it has 4 lines per stanza, except for the last one that has 2. It has this kind of formalized structure, and basically if we're writing prose poetry, we have to come up with some kind of formal structure. The the material is vague to me because I actually you're talking about a wife and a husband, at the beginning as you're explaining it to me, but when I read it, I have no idea. I don't know who we're talking about. So I don't know whether we're talking about specific people or whether we're talking about sort of some kind of universal people because it's so vague. So I don't know whether this is so if it were specific, it would tend to lead me to think that this is a story because the way a story works is by representing real people doing real things in real time, and they serve as a kind of metaphor for my experience. So I get to read about them, but they're metaphorically representations of me, so I learn from reading about their experiences. That's what happens generally in a formal story or prose. Poetry can be more what we call metaphysical. So we can have metaphysical poetry, and that means it's not as physical. It's more abstract, and it's more about, in a sense, it's about ideas. But again, is this still? Oh my goodness, why are you doing that? Okay, here we go. So these are some things that you might want to, that I want you to decide about in terms of this piece. I'm moving it down here. There's some things that I really like in this piece. So I'm noting here a little bit that the length of these stanzas sort of changes, and that's part of that formal structure that I'm not really understanding. There doesn't seem to be some kind of structure imposed on this. And then later on we have, I love this, I am no Sita, Draupadi, or any mythological figure. I go beyond boundaries for emotions are limitless. I'm a little confused by that because I still don't really know who this I is. I don't know if she's a physical person or a metaphysical person. And I don't have any way to really understand her. But I am not the sufferer or the inflicted. I am a woman. I want to enjoy and go out and have fun. I love that. I love dropping into that sort of, real. I don't know. Do you know that Cyndi Lauper, girls just want to have fun? It's one of my daughter's favorites. I think it's like everyone's secret, everyone's secret girl inside our heart. That's our favorite song because it's like, I just want to have fun. It's like, yeah. So I want to go out and have fun. There is no one stopping me. And I love this line. I am weighed down by myself. I really like that. And then I also really like where you're going with in these next things. My responsibility as a daughter, sister, wife, and mother scales. I don't know exactly what scales means in that, but I feel it. Scales more, I think, sort of like on that ledger sheet, that balance, right? Scales more than my individuality. I know this should be the other way. I want to shrug off, live life, but So I like those ideas too. I also, because I'm actually sort of personally obsessed with this idea of centerness, center. This is my own doing. I do this for myself, my insecurities as a pretext. I wanted to be included, wanted to be in the center. You know, I really like that line too. But it's almost like this character, again, I don't understand the character. I don't know who the character is. I don't know whether the character is physical, a human being, or a metaphysical idea. I don't know. But I still like this idea, this sort of metaphysical idea that I wanted to be in the center. I don't know if that's, or if it's maybe to be the center of attention at a party. I don't know whether it's physical or metaphysical, but I did like the idea very much. Um, Now, Vandana, this is where I'm getting to the business here. Okay, you've given me two endings. You've written a poem that has a certain form. This is so important for all of us. You have to decide what your story does. You make the decisions. If this character is maybe not always making the decisions for herself, right? If this character is sometimes, constructed by society to be a daughter, a mother, a wife, and all these other things, this is not the case when we write. When we write, I hesitate, maybe it's blasphemy, but we are a god, okay? We do whatever we want. And one of the things that we develop in our writing is figuring out and accessing what we want and putting it on the page. We make things, right? And that thing that we make, the story, is a world. We make a world. It could be a poem, it could be a prose poem, it could be a story, it could be a novel. We create a world that's never been seen before. So I'll go back to when we write, we're a god. There's some responsibility to being a god like that, which is we have to make the decisions. We have to own them. We can't seek poor Otis to tell us which is the right way to go or not to go, okay? We can't do that. So you have sent me this piece a number of times. I can tell that it's so important to you. This is the next thing that I want to say. So, and I'll tell you what I see my job as. I totally understand, and I think it's a great thing to try and grapple, and I think this is what we're all doing. Every writer is doing this. We grapple with the difficulties of life through writing. I mean, the difficulties of life throw us to writing. There's a reason, I was talking to Ram, why are we doing it? Okay, this is just as significant for us as writers, and we should think about it as it is for our characters. Okay, our struggle, there's some external struggle. What is it that we're having? And our answer to that is to write. And the question is, why are we doing that, right? But our objective is not to write one thing. This is what I'm adding. This is what I'm going to say. Okay, we are not going to solve the difficulties of struggle. That's a never-ending story. What I want to encourage everyone to do is to make things, to write. So you're asking me questions about this piece, and I've given you some advice about working on it. But what I'm going to say is make your decisions about this piece. Either pursue it and finish it and send it someplace. Or, and we do this a lot, we abandon pieces because we don't know exactly what we want to do with it yet. That's fine. That's even a good thing sometimes. We can't figure it out. But you've been driven to write, and what I want you to do is abandon it and then write something else. So instead of being the person, which we all are, this is why I started writing too. I was like, life is difficult and I want answers. What happened was life was difficult. I wanted answers. I went to writing in order to try and get those answers. And what I found instead is that I became a maker of stories. So what I got was not what I went for. I didn't get any answers, but I became a maker of things, maker of these worlds. And that was an important experience for me. So Vandana, I enjoy a lot of the things that you're going for in this piece. I would probably encourage you not to concentrate just on writing this piece. I know what that's like. I've written that piece that was an opus, like this is my life's work. I'm going to do everything right here. And I had a writer say to me, Otis, this meanders like a drunk on a bender. That's what they said to me. I still know who that person is. And I still know where that person lives. So, work on this piece if you want, or put it aside and work on your next piece. That's what I'm going to suggest. And I would love to see that next piece next week or the week after. Thank you, Vandana.
Sure. So you are not suggesting me any ending?
Yes, to say the least. I am not suggesting any ending. I'm saying that's up to you. You end it the way you want to end it. And if you're satisfied with it and you think it's ready to be sent out, you send it out. And if you don't feel it's ready to be sent out, then you abandon it and you write something new. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Let's see. Madhavi.
Hi, Otis. Good morning.
Now that would be more like Madhavi. Would that be a better pronunciation?
It's Madhavi.
Go tell me.
Madhavi.
Madhavi.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I need to drill these. I need to drill. I've learned everything through drills. Just drill. I got to do that with my daughter with some science. Like she had trouble on one card, and I read 3 more cards, and I go back to that card, 4 more cards, back to that card, 5 more cards, back to that card. That's how I've learned everything. Okay, so let's take a look at your piece.
Otis, I haven't received my feedback yet.
What?
So,
Oh my
yeah, I
goodness.
didn't. Yeah, you didn't do it. So I'm seeing it for the first time right now.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Well, sorry about that. You know why? It's because I was so good and I read your piece so early that I'm like, I have forever to give it. Have I ever told you the story about when I waited tables? I was the worst waiter ever. I was the worst waiter. I mean, I was a nightmare as a waiter. If you ordered something from me, you never got it. You didn't. You just sat there. As I went and did other things in my imagination. Okay, so I apologize for that. Why don't you tell us a little bit about this piece and then read this first paragraph.
First of all, I finally got this thing on paper. I was struggling for a long time. This is about Arjun when he was living incognito as Brahmanala, the eunuch. And I wanted to have a sneak peek into his mind when there was a war going on and he couldn't participate because he was dressed as a woman. So he actually ends up going to the war single-handedly. He defeats a lot of people. But before that, when he was not allowed to step out, what happens? So nobody has ever talked about it. A lot of scope for interpretation. So this is mine.
Okay, great. Do you want to read the first page?
Sure. Arjun the warrior stood on the terrace, clad in women's clothes. His bulging biceps were hidden underneath the layers of flowing dupattas, and his head was covered with a long veil, like all the other women living in the antechamber of King Virat's palace. Arjun had loaded his muscular forearms from elbow to wrist with colorful bangles made of glass, beads, and shells. His battle-hardened hands were smeared with alka. The red color helped camouflage the blisters and the roughness he had acquired over the course of time in his long quest for becoming the best archer. His brothers and peers called him the greatest warrior of their generation, and yet Arjun watched from a distance as 8,000 chariots, 1,000 elephants, and 60,000 horses filed out of the palace gates of Matsya Kingdom. He calmly watched the procession of warriors from the terrace. Dozens of bangles that he wore on his forearm made a jingling sound as he lifted one of his palms and gently placed it on the railing as he looked down. King Virat is taking the whole cavalry to fight off some stupid invaders. Who does that? Arjun heard his wife Draupadi say from behind him.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Well, I think you're doing a great job in the writing. I mean, it reminds me a little bit of Ram's piece. I mean, I feel totally involved in what's happening here, and I think you're writing these great scenes, and I'm really reading very happily. You notice I'm marking a few things as sounding a little bit modern to me. Like, who does that? I mean, that's something my daughter says. Who she says, like I'll do something like uh, maybe I'll take all the dishes from the sink and put them in her bed because she didn't wash them. And she was like, Dad, who does that? So it sounds a little bit modern to my ear. Um, Gosh, why are you doing this to me? Oh, because you're tapped into my iPad and it's timing out. The other thing was his brothers and peers called him the greatest warrior of their generation. You're saying that the brothers and peers are using this phrase in a sense, the greatest warrior of their generation. But I don't. I feel like that's a modern phrase too. We talk about our generation and stuff like that. So
He was
I mean, not that
actually
they.
referred to as the greatest warrior of their generation. But
Right.
I will see how I can put it in some other words. Like,
Yeah. Well,
yeah,
who's saying
got it.
that
Yeah.
exactly?
Okay.
Who's saying that? Like, I understand a narrator saying something like that because a narrator has that sort of overview. But I don't often say to myself, Otis, I am truly the greatest writer of my generation. I mean, I just, I don't think generationally. Anyway, just take it or
I
not.
understand.
The the main thing in this section, I probably just have one thing to say. I think it's very enjoyable, but I bring up this idea of exposition in dialogue, basically, that the scene seems to be written to explore to give us exposition, to explain to us what's happening, basically. As opposed to what I would suggest scenes actually are. Scenes to me are about the characters who are on the page. It's about the protagonist trying to get what they want and us understanding why they want it and being confronted by something that prevents them from doing that. And therefore we test character. So that's what I would call dynamic action. It's dynamic because there's forces operating against each other, and I actually care about the outcome. That's going back to what we were saying to Ram, that the basic idea of story is the reader wonders what's going to happen, and they care about the outcome. So they both wonder about the outcome and they care about it, and that's the dynamic action of a scene. And so if we want a scene to be truly riveting, which we do, we want to bring it up to that dynamic action. We want it to be the most exciting sporting event that we've ever seen. We want it to be, this team that's been struggling forever to finally win whatever it is, versus this team that's like in biblical reference, it's like Goliath, right? David. In the biblical references, we have David, who's little tiny, he's just a little boy. Not true, he has a sling. And Goliath is huge and powerful. What's going to happen? And we need to care. So with the basic idea, I mean, you're really arriving at this level now. So this is the next level I'm going to suggest. The first level is for us to get to the point where we're actually writing characters that seem like they're made of flesh and blood, that we're using details, that we create an environment, and we also create the sort of container for the experience, which is point of view. Point of view is the container for the reader's experience, and we limit that in order to create a location for the reader to live in. That's the first level. Frankly, there are a lot of people that can arrive at that level because you just learn it, right? It's just, in a sense, it's kind of obvious. I use the words, I do this, I control it this way. We learn the grammar of stories. The next level is understanding that when we focus, and here we have Arjuna and Draupadi, right? If we're going to frame Arjuna and Draupadi, the story is about Arjuna and Draupadi right now. That's why we're looking at them. It's not about why the war is happening or their strategy or their lack of strategy or any of those other things. It's actually not a big change because you do have a kind of arc in this, right? Where I would say Arjuna comes in the beginning of this story and he's sort of like, he feels relegated. You know, he's in hiding, he's dressed and behaving, I guess, like the eunuch. And he's seeing sort of the thing that gives him a sense of purpose and meaning and understanding and self-identity. He's seeing that drift away. War. The war is taking place without him. And he basically he learns, well, he doesn't quite learn in the pages that you've written, but we could recast it a little bit. He basically is part of the defense of the palace, you know, of the women and children who've been left behind. There's only 15 of them, and he's one of them. He's not really considered one of them because he's in hiding, but he is one of them, and Draupadi knows. So there is a kind of arc here, but now we have to figure out how we get to it. I'm going to do something very crafty. Maybe it's confusing, but like Ram wrote the middle, but not the end, and not the beginning and not the end. You have written kind of the beginning and the end, but you haven't written the middle. You haven't. So the beginning establishes, the conflict, the external conflict that makes the reader wonder what's going to happen. It establishes why we care. You may or may not have that exactly, but I think you kind of do. You know, the sort of longing of identity, to be associated, to basically be a tremendous warrior and then not be able to practice your craft. You know, it would be like, you know, me being removed from my computer so I couldn't do my typing. You know, it's like that. So you have that essentially, and then you have kind of the ending where there's a kind of change in terms of his perception of himself. He feels like he's completely lost, but then he realizes that in a sense he's found. He's still always him, and he still has a responsibility to others, even if it's not glory, right?
This is actually not the end of the story. I'm sorry, interrupt.
No, I know it's not the end of the story, just the scene. Right. Every scene, even a 6-word story, even a sonnet, even a scene, even a paragraph, even a scene, even a chapter and a book, they all have beginnings, middles, and ends. They all move from A, we could say, through B and arrive at C. So you have A, Arjuna, at the beginning. You have C, kind of, but you haven't written B. How do we get there? Instead, what you wrote was exposition about what's going on. But you wrote what I call exposition and dialogue. You know, this is, Malavi, this is something that happens if you watch Hollywood movies, and, you know, a lot, they'll do this. They'll be like, oh my goodness, it's a bomb, right? We've just seen that it's a bomb, right? So that's exposition. They're telling us what it is. Tick, tock, tock. It's like, well, that's a plasma release, blah, 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 blah. And that can only be diffused if you have stork's blood that's brought in by ba da 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 da. That's exposition and dialogue is what it's called. You're explaining something in dialogue. There's a movie, probably only Abhinav has seen this. So Abhinav, did you see the original Airplane? There's a scene that makes fun of exposition and dialogue, basically, where
It's a spoof.
Airplane is a spoof about these. Yeah, it's a spoof about disaster airline movies, which were very popular in the 70s. So I'm just getting everyone up to speed. So, and something happens in the airplane, and the stewardess, opens up the door and says, Captain, there's something wrong with the airplane. And he says, what is it? And she says, well, it's a big thing with wings that flies through the air, but that's not important right now. It's hysterical.
It reminds me
What
of
is
a
it?
lot of Mel Brooks movies.
Yeah, yeah, making fun of the exposition and dialogue, basically, um, anyway, that's what you have a little bit here, but you have a tremendously realized scene. I did not know this story about Arjuna. Clearly, I don't know every story, but I think it's a really interesting place to focus. I think it'll reveal a lot of interesting things about that character. So I look forward to more. That's my comment.
Sure. Still trying to explore.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think to me, there's sort of there's two ways to go in terms of writing something that's very long, a novel, for example. A short story, maybe you can get all the way through in a couple days and write the whole thing. But basically, the two methods I've heard, and I think everyone works on a kind of hybrid system between the two, is that you write from beginning and right to the end. You'll excuse my language, everyone, but this is called famously the shitty first draft. We just get it done from beginning to end. I am going to tell you from my personal experience that there's a lot to be said for that. Because what it does is it releases us from this very difficult job of trying to imagine everything, all these places, all the details, all those first level things, that I was talking about. It's a lot of work to do that. You're imagining a society and a culture and a world that you really don't know and you've never seen. So that takes a lot of work. That takes a lot of mental work. So it can be very advantageous to write the first draft and just get it done. And now that imaginative work, that level of work that takes your brain, you don't need to use it so much because now you do see the world. And now you bring it up to the next level, making sure that all your scenes are actually dynamic, that they're necessary, and that they move from A to B. And then we move the next scene from B to C, and we start to create this momentum through the story. And that can be the next level of revision. However, other people do sometimes suggest, if you're writing a novel, that you really write the beginning and make sure you have it wired. I think that can be important because writing the beginning and really understanding the beginning means that you understand really the true nature of the external conflict. You've really worked it out, and you've really tried to work out what the internal conflict is. So I don't think it's important to get it exactly right. It's not a question of polish, but it is a question of understanding sort of psychologically the base of your entire story. People write entire novels and they do not know what the external conflict is, nor they don't know who the antagonist is. They don't know who the protagonist is. They don't know who the antagonist is. They don't know what the conflict is between them, and they do not know why it matters. I don't think that that's probably a good way to enter into a novel totally. But even that said, if you don't know all those things are there, and maybe it takes some time to discover them too. So, I mean, you have your work cut out for you if your protagonist is Arjuna, because you personally probably don't know the warrior character very well in an external way. Does that make sense? Like, it's hard. Like, I could write a story. If I wrote a novel from a mother's point of view, it would be difficult for me because externally, I don't know the mother's struggle very well. But on a deeper level, I do. On a universal level, I do, because I understand the struggle of life, and I know that the mother who I'm writing about also is struggling with life. So I have to find I have to be able to inform the mother's struggle with my struggle and have it be universally true. You have the same situation with Arjuna. You're going to be writing about the struggle of a warrior in a very different time period, in a very different life and culture. And you're going to have to find the commonality between your struggle so that you can breathe life into the character of Arjuna, who you're writing about. That's not going to be easy. So you don't just know that. I'm going to say, so this is important for all of us. We might imagine we know the struggle of other people. No, I don't think so, because we often don't even know our own struggle truly and fully. So when we explore the struggle of characters through stories, we discover both our own struggle and their struggle simultaneously. And that is a lot of difficult work. So all that said, I don't think we often go into the beginning of our story and we're able to just wire out what the struggle is and all of that. Not honestly. If we're a hack writer, maybe. Then we just come up with it like a Hollywood writer and we just go like, oh, they're trying to prove themselves at this, that, and the other thing. We do, Ram was talking about James Bond. We just do hack work. I encourage us to do deeper work than that. So all of that said, Madhavi, I don't know what I'm helping you with except for carry on.
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Sri Charan, we better get to your work and we're going to have to dispatch you quickly.
Hey, hi Otis. How are you?
Hey, how are you? Long time
Yeah, I'm
no
good.
see. What happened?
Yeah, there was. I was involved in some office work for many days.
Oh,
Like,
you don't have to tell us. There's no confessions necessary. Involved in
okay.
some office work. We've heard that story many times. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it was the time of our main point there, so it continues for 1 month.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have your piece up here. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about this piece.
Yeah, okay. So I wrote this last month, I guess, for a website called ReadC. So they held a competition every week based on a prompt. So that prompt is assume someone who is receiving gifts. So here, a boy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, okay. So that is the background of the story. So this is a story about a wolf and a boy. The wolf, the boy has saved the wolf's cup, and so the wolf gives some hairs for the boy in return.
Right. Okay. That's great. Can you read the first page?
Yeah, sure. The wolf sniffed as she moved stealthily amid the rock huts. The hair was still gasping in her blood-stained mouth. Her pup Luna led her through the rock lanes, moving from one corner to another. They knew what the humans did to the intruders, especially if they had fangs and claws. Not all humans are bad, she thought. Like not all wolves are bad. The boy who helped Luna get out of the iron cage proved her point. She was wary though, enough not to make as small a noise as her breath. Her hind legs stepped where her forelegs did, and she kept well away from the stones that shone red under the straw pits. She saw the red things eat wood whole, not much leaving a small bone. She heard the humans call them fire. Here, Luna whispered at the door of a hut, a dwarf even by the standards of other huts. The wolf placed the hair gently at the door and stepped back. Not dead yet. She likes her kills fresh and their blood warm. A beautiful thing, she thought before turning back to the bushes. Most beautiful of all. The boy woke up the next morning as he had on countless mornings before. The sun was not up yet, but it would be soon. Just the right time to catch some fish and pick some fresh mushroom before the other folks staked their claim. His father was still snoring like a giant bear, but his mother lay still as if she was dead. Her bruises were fresh from last night. The father bet the boy too that night. Damia thought that gave him chills. The wolf escaped, his father cried.
Okay, good. Thank you. That entire day. Yeah, so I think this is a very intriguing beginning and a nice idea. You're making a lot of nice decisions here, I think. Um, there, I think you do, you know, not you're moving through the two different points of view.
Mm, yeah.
The first point of view that's established is a little bit confusing to me.
Mm,
I don't know whether you're I don't know whether you're in the you want to be in the point of view of the mother wolf or the pup Luna, which is also a female wolf, I think,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
So I'm not sure which point of view you want. I think you want to decide,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know.
My point of view is the wolf, but I understand why it was confusing.
Right. Um, right. They knew what humans did to intruders. Yeah, and then there's probably a couple things. I don't. How? What kind of piece are you trying to develop? A short story or something longer? I mean,
Yeah,
this
it's a
feels like a
short
beginning.
story of 3,000 words, not more than 3,000 words.
Okay. Okay. Well, I think that is a good start. Um, the wolf's point of view is a little bit strange to me. You know, I noticed that like not all humans are bad, the wolf thought. So my feeling, I mean, what do I know? But like people see a difference between animals and humans,
Mm,
right?
yeah.
Whereas I think there's a lot of evidence that we are also animals. I'm not sure animals would see a difference between people and themselves. You know,
Okay. Yeah, I think it's a point of perspective, but
just something to think about. Like how, because
yeah.
if you're going to do the wolf's point of view, you have to see the world from the wolf's point of view.
Mm,
You don't want to see the wolf, you don't want the wolf to have a point of view that is like a human being. It has to be different. And you have to decide how it's different.
mm, okay.
My daughters, and this also seems like it could, you know, it could be a work for like, you know, like adolescent, you know, what they call young adult fiction or something like that. Young adult fiction is a huge market because kids are forced to read, whereas adults are not. So
Mm,
it means that, and so writing something they're forced to read and writing something that they enjoy reading can really be quite lucrative. Talk to the Harry Potter person, you know, and many other people. Anyway, my daughters read a book that had an animal point of view, and for example, they saw roads, you know, as like these sort of evil rivers, you know, and they saw the things on the roads. They called them manglers because those were cars. They didn't call them cars. They called them manglers because from their point of view, when they hit you, they mangle you,
okay.
right?
Is
They're
it
almost,
point of view of a rabbit or something?
I can't remember. Yeah, it might be.
Okay, because I read one story that sounds similar like that.
Okay. So you have something like that, but that's a really all-encompassing point of view. We have the difficulty that we're using language and human language to convey
Mm,
that point of view, and that's part of the struggle. So are the wolves thinking at all, you know, or are the rabbits thinking at all? Do they have the word mangler? Do they understand death in that way? Who knows? But we're doing the best we can to create this illusion of their point of view, and that's what this sort of violates a little bit.
okay.
Um, I like this ending here. These are the kind of little things that you do that are so good. You know, here Luna whispered at the door of the hut, a dwarf even by the standards of other huts. The wolf placed the hare gently at the door and stepped back, not dead yet. She likes her kills fresh and her blood warm. A beautiful thing, she thought before turning back to the bushes. Most beautiful of all. What a wonderful line. Like that does feel like the wolf's point of view. I mean, I don't know why it does. Because it's sort of mystical and I don't understand it. And it sets up a sense of intrigue that I hope that you're going to come back to. Because I don't understand it, but I want to, and I'm reading it and feel like
Oh,
I'm involved in something. A
okay.
beautiful
So
thing.
I
Don't
want
ruin.
to say something like it did
Oh, don't
not come
ruin it
back to
for
this
me.
point. Okay,
Do not ruin it for me.
Yeah, sure. I won't tell it.
That's a mistake. Okay, a beautiful thing she thought before turning back to the bushes, most beautiful at all. But this is, Sri Charan, this is something actually you probably have to deal with because you're what's called a talented writer, okay? I'm a talentless hack, okay? I work hard at my writing. I've done the best I can with my limited potential, right? But you are talented. You do things with language that are unexpected. It's a burden and a gift. And know that secretly I probably despise you to some degree, right? Because I don't have these gifts and I want to undermine your gifts. I'm trying to be funny here a little bit. But when you do something with your gifts, unfortunately, this is why it's a burden. When you do something with your gifts, you're going to have to follow through with it. It's going to have to take you someplace that you don't want to go necessarily. Does that make any sense? So when you write something, a line that's, you know, an exquisite line, that also comes with a responsibility. And you might not like it, but you need to start to recognize when you are writing those lines, and you need to cultivate them and help them grow. You don't know what they're going to grow into. You have you want to put it on a narrow frame. Try not to. I'm setting you up for, I know you want to write this story, complete it, and probably publish it. That's your objective. But I'm talking about something that's more long-term in terms of your career as a writer, to understand that you have this talent with language, and almost a poetic talent. I know I've studied poetry because I'm talentless and I have to do a lot of hard work. I've studied it and I've tried to do it, and you let the language lead you. It's not totally in our control. That's a big term thing. In a small term, yes, just nail down this story, get it all written, send it out. Write another story, send it out. Write another story, send it out. Start publishing your stories, develop your craft. That's all fine. But also just keep that in mind. Okay, beautiful line.
I think, Aditi, you had a question?
Actually, I was just going to suggest for research, there is a series by Robin Hobb where the novels are told, it's through part of it's through the point of view of a wolf, but it's like a wolf and a boy who connect, and it's very well done. Okay.
I guess. The protagonist's name is Fitz, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's the one I was thinking of.
Yeah, I had that in mind while writing this as well. I took inspiration from that, really.
Right, and these are actually, it's a kind of retelling of very old stories about the connections between animals and humans. I'm trying to think. I mean, there's the biblical story of Samson and the thorn of the lion, but that's also a more ancient story than biblical. So, I think it was Samson. I can't remember all the characters. But, what else? I just have some notes there's small notes. I think that this is developing. I think my biggest question, to explore, since you're doing the point of view of the wolf, what is the motivation of the wolf? And so Aditi, I think that's a great suggestion. You know what I read so much is I read animal behavior. I read academic psychological articles. I read a lot of things. I do read a lot of science. I'm trying to understand the wolf's behavior in a more universal way a little bit. I don't know, because right now it seems as if the wolf is bringing the rabbit as a kind of tribute.
Yeah, as gratitude.
I don't think a wolf would develop a sense of tribute. I think that is a fantasy. So I personally think.
Okay, so
your cat your cat kills a mouse and brings it to you, I think that's because they want to be included and they want to be useful in the community that protects them. That's what I think. What do I know? But tribute, I don't think so. I'm just throwing it out to you because I want you to write the best story from this wolf's point of view, and I want your story to make sense on the deepest levels to the point. So, like, I think that when a reader reads a story like this, we're creating a world, but I want that world to make our own world make even more sense than it already does. There is, in the storytelling art, there is a lot. This is maybe my personal peeve, but storytellers throughout centuries have written stories from human perspectives, of course, because we are human, and we color the world with our human perspective. And our human perspective sometimes makes us not see the world as it actually is. I feel like we have a responsibility not to perpetuate that lack of that false vision of what the world is, and as writers get to a truer vision of what the world is. So I'm just going to suggest that we stay very conscientious about that. And so when we think of the actions of this wolf bringing something, I'm not sure that we would make it the same as tribute. Tribute is something that develops between human beings, between, let's say the peasants and the headman, who could cause a lot of pain and suffering to people, right? So the peasant brings tribute to the king to keep the king happy so that the king doesn't punish the peasant. And then it becomes a sense of expectation. That's where I think tribute comes from. But what do I know? I want you to think about it. I like the construction. I like your attention to the rabbit. I don't really understand when the wolf brings the sheep and then somehow knows to take the sheep away. That's going to be problematic, right? For the boy to leave the sheep. We do want problems in our stories. Problems are what keep our story going. We don't solve problems, we make problems throughout. But I think it's a promising beginning, and you show your skill with language again, and you make very nice choices, and there's nice details in this piece. I'm wondering about the time period. He has a scythe, so it's a time of I don't know where to place it. There's huts. He has a scythe so that there's wheat. Are they growing wheat? So historically,
No.
I'm not.
Okay. Yeah, it's not. I did not give much thought about that. It just came. It's just the environment I set.
This is what I'm telling you. When I went to graduate school, there was a guy everyone thought he was so talented. I was like, what does he know? He can write great sentences. He's got great language. That's all he's got. I didn't have any of that. I'm like, I'm going to work harder, and I'm going to show him something. So yeah, you don't think about it. You just let your fingers do your typing, and that's fine. But in the end, you do want the place to be real. You don't want the reader ever to question things, because when they question something, then as soon as the reader's reading, and we want them like this, we want them gripped by the throat, involved in our story. But as soon as they wonder about something, they've gone here. They've distanced themselves from our work, and when they distance themselves from our work, they think about their own lives, and they think about taking care of their own problems, and then they close the book and they put it away, and we never want that to happen.
Yeah. Authenticity.
Keep going.
Yeah.
Keep going. It's great to see.
Yeah, thanks, Otis.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Otis.
Okay, sorry, long one.
Okay, this brings us to the end of this session.